Silver Crown by Robert C. O'Brien, Chapter 18, The Cave. When Ellen had stopped being sick, they inspected her ankle. There were no bones sticking out or bulging where they shouldn't, so they decided that it was not broken. But it hurt dreadfully, and when she tried very cautiously to stand on it, she turned pale again and sat down quickly. "I can't walk," she said. "You've sprained it." "I must have. It's the same ankle I hurt before. I suppose it was still weak. As long as it isn't broken, it will heal." "Yes, but when? We'll just have to rest a while and see." That was the trouble. Neither of them knew much about sprained ankles, though Ellen could remember vaguely when her brother David had sprained his wrist playing football a couple of years before. He had gone to the doctor and come home with his arm in a sling. In a little while her ankle began to swell alarmingly. "I think we're supposed to put hot compresses on it." "How do you do that?" "You heat up some water, then you soak a towel in it and put it on." Or was it a cold compress? Ellen was not sure. Otto said, "There's plenty of water in the brook, but I'll have to get some wood to make a fire. There's none down here." Since her fall, Ellen had scarcely looked around her. They were in the flat bottom of a crevasse. A rock corridor stretching in both directions as far as she could see, the walls and the slit of sky above them growing close and narrower the farther off she looked, like railroad tracks meeting in the distance. Strangely enough, when they spoke down here at the bottom, there was scarcely any echo at all. The floor she sat on was clean gray stone and slanted toward the far wall. Along that wall ran a stream, perhaps 4 feet wide, looking only slightly less dark and mysterious from here than it had from above. From wall to wall was at a guess about 12 feet. On the near wall, just behind her, hung the grapevine they had climbed down. A little way downstream toward the distant mountains, the water broke with a gurgle against the scarred gray face of a boulder, the first of the jumbled rocks they had seen from the forest edge. Amid the boulders, she remembered, was a cleft in the wall. And it was true, there was scarcely a twig of wood to be seen anywhere. There were no trees down here, nor any growing thing, and naturally, when the stream flooded in the spring, it would wash away the boughs that happened to fall from the trees above. "I've got to climb out of here anyway," Otto said. "When I get to the top, I'll bring some wood back. We can make a fire right here." He squirmed his way up to the first boulder with no trouble, then stood on top of it looking around. Then, with a wave of his hand, he disappeared behind it. Ellen sat, watching her ankle, wondering when it would stop hurting. Then she heard a shout from above her, looked up, and there was Otto's face, looking down at her from the top of the crevasse. On the far side, the side they had to gain. "I'm getting some wood," he called. "I'll throw it down. Was it hard to climb?" "It's nothing. It was fun. I'll tell you when I come back. I've got a surprise for you." His head disappeared, and in a moment a cascade of firewood began pouring over the edge about 20 feet upstream from where Ellen sat. It kept coming for 15 minutes, and Otto must have been working like a bulldozer, because scarcely a second later than another big branch did not come crashing down. His head popped over the side again. "Does that look like enough?" Ellen looked at the pile that had risen against the stone wall. "Yes, there's plenty. I'm coming down." But it was a few minutes before he reappeared, wading around the boulder through the stream. He had taken time to cut what he carried in his hand, a sturdy green bough that was bent in a natural L shape at one end. He handed it to her. "Here, I'll cut another one the next time I go up." "What's it for?" "A crutch, but you'll need 2. Ellen looked at it with some dismay. "But I can't walk all the way with crutches. I don't even know how." "I know that." He started arranging sticks for a fire. "But you might be able to walk a little way." "But what's the use?" "Because I found a good place for us to camp until your ankle gets better." "What kind of a place?" "That's the surprise." "Wait till you see it." He would say no more. He lit the fire, filled the pot with water, and put it on to heat. They tested it by putting their wrists in, and when it was just uncomfortably hot, they took it off the fire. They had no towel, of course, but Otto peeled off his shirt, rolled it up, and dipped it in the water. "It needed washing anyway," he said cheerfully. They applied hot compresses steadily for the next half hour or so, and somewhat to the surprise of both, the treatment seemed to work, although the swelling did not go down. Neither did it increase. The pain eased, and most important, Ellen's alarm subsided. After Otto had climbed the wall again and cut her another crutch, she was even persuaded to try a few hobbling steps. It was not very difficult, though she could only go a little way at a time, because her arms and shoulders got tired, but she quickly learned to rest by leaning slightly forward, dividing her weight between the crutches and her good leg. She also learned to keep the knee of her other leg bent so that her sore ankle stayed well off the ground. Otto stood clear at hand while she practiced, ready to dash in and catch her if she stumbled. Finally, she let go of the crutches and sank to the ground, puffing a little but pleased with herself for having learned to use them. Now I'll rest a while. Then I want to see the surprise. How far is it? Just a little way, around on the other side of the boulder. I can't climb over it. I'll have to go in the stream. That's all right. It's only 3 inches deep, and the bottom's flat. Wading through the stream over a slippery bottom on homemade crutches was not the best therapy. It's not the best therapy for a sprained ankle. Ellen had to stop and rest 11 times on the way. Once one crutch slipped away, but Otto's shoulder was there to grab, and they got the crutch back somehow before it floated away downstream. And then they were around the boulder, and Ellen was back on dry land. In front of them was the cleft in the rock wall they had seen from above. Otto, who had already been through it, led the way impatiently as Ellen labored along behind him. She made her way slowly, one small step at a time, up the slight incline that led from the stream bed. The cleft looked like a doorway in a Gothic cathedral, and it was just wide enough for her crutches. She went into it and found herself in a magic room. It was a cave, but like no cave she had ever heard of, for it was lit with flashing diamonds. She gasped in delight, while Otto hopped around on one foot. "I told you I had a surprise!" The cave had a front door and a back door. The back door, which they had just entered, faced east and led to the stream, an inexhaustible water supply. The front door faced west and led over a rocky climb to the forest, an inexhaustible wood supply. Through the western door poured a gay shaft of late afternoon sunlight. It struck the inside wall of the cave and shattered into 1,000 spears of brilliance, mostly white, but mixed faintly with blue, red, orange, and yellow. For the walls of the cave, made of sandstone, had become mixed with another kind of stone, tiny crystals as clear as glass, not really diamonds, but almost as shiny. Ellen could even remember their name. Her father had told her once when she found a piece of the same kind of stone in the country. Quartzite. What? Quartzite. That's what these shiny stones are. Aren't they beautiful? I knew you'd like it, and it's got 3 rooms. Not really 3 rooms, but the cave floor was split into 3 levels, like some modern houses. As you walked from the back door to the front, you came to a ledge of stone waist high. When you clambered up that, you stood on the second level, looking down at where you had just been. Farther along was another ledge in a third section, higher than the second, so it had the effect of 3 rooms, even without partitions. All in all, the cave was nearly as big as a small house. It was dry and cool, and because of its shining walls, astonishingly light. Otto went back and got their rucksacks. Then he moved the stack of firewood to the cave, since it was nearly supper time. They discovered there was a perpetual draft, a whisper of air so slight you could feel it only faintly on your ears when you stood in either doorway. It blew in the front door and out the back, keeping the atmosphere from getting the dank smells that most caves have. And it meant that the place was to build the fire was inside the cave near the back door. All the smoke blew out as neatly as if it were rising up a chimney. Otto got it lit just in time. As the sun sank in the west, the shaft of light through the front door climbed higher up the wall, shrank to half its size, then a quarter, and then flicked out altogether as if someone had turned a switch, and they were in the dark. There was no twilight in caves. The fluttering firelight illuminated only the lowest level of the wall, and that only dimly, in a deep ruby red. Beyond the first ledge, the cave was dark. At the far end, they could barely make out the faint gray silhouette of the front door, and that was all. Otto still had to go out into the woods to get some bedding, for the floor of the cave was rock hard, and unlike the walls, coal black except for some patches of gravelly sand. What they wanted was a flashlight, but they had none. He was getting ready to grope his way through the blackness into the outer twilight. Then he had an idea. "A pine knot," he said. "What's that?" "For a light. They're as good as lanterns. My mother uses them to start the fire." On the stack of firewood he found a knobby pine branch shaped like a club, with a cluster of knots at the thick end where branches had once grown out. He thrust this end into the fire, and when he pulled it out he had a fine flaming torch, good for perhaps half an hour. Holding this high above his head, he set off through the cave, casting monstrous leaping shadows on the walls. In the morning, when the sunlight stabbed through the back door and the cave was light again, they had to face 2 hard facts. Ellen's ankle seemed no better at all, and their food was running low. The night before, Otto had come in with a huge armload of soft-needled pine boughs for bedding. They had cooked and eaten almost half their meat. Now, they took the food they had left and divided it into little piles, each one representing a meal. It did not come out even. By splitting the meat into very skimpy proportions, they had enough for 2 dinners, whereas there was quite a lot of hardtack, enough for 5 or 6 days. There were 3 eggs apiece, 3 breakfasts. There were 3 ears of corn and 2 carrots. I wish it would get better, Ellen said, looking at her misshapen ankle, which was as big around as a grapefruit, and which she could not move at all without pain worse than a toothache. Don't worry, it will. Otto was acquiring a bedside manner. The only thing is, we don't know how soon. We should put some more compresses on it. They revived the breakfast fire, and Otto went shirtless again. They really worked hard and seriously at it for more than an hour, and at the end of which the ankle was no smaller at all, but had turned a very bright red. Was that a good sign or bad? They did not know. At lunchtime, Ellen said, "We'll have to go on starvation rations." "I guess so. Let's say that my ankle won't heal for 2 more days." "How do you know? Don't you see we have to plan as if it might not? Because otherwise, if it doesn't, we'll run out of food." Otto thought this over rather gloomily. "All right," he said, "but I wish I didn't get so hungry. We had meat for dinner last night, so tonight we won't eat any. We'll have some for tomorrow night, and still enough left for 1 meal after we start again." After lunch, Ellen felt sleepy. Her inflamed ankle and all the hot compresses had made her feverish, and her head ached. She lay in her blanket on the pine needles and fell asleep. She slept a long time, for when she awoke, the sunlight through the front door was already beginning to climb the wall. Otto was nowhere to be seen, and neither was his rucksack, though its contents were there, dumped in a heap beside his pallet. He must have gone for wood, Ellen thought. But why would he take his rucksack? She pondered this for a moment, but could think of no answer. Then she thought of her own rucksack, with her handbag in it and the silver crown. She had not even looked at it since she left Mrs. Fitzpatrick's house. The bag lay within reach. She opened it and took the crown out. And saw to her astonishment that it had changed. The little blue stones set in silver, which formerly had sparkled and twinkled like stars, now glowed with a steady blue-white light. It was a calm sort of light, as unwavering as an electric bulb, and many, many times brighter than before. Ellen looked at it dumbfounded. Could it have something to do with the light in the cave? She turned to the bright sunspot on the wall, now a third of the way up to the ceiling. It was always glittering, dancing and flickering with 1,000 shifting spears of light. And that should, if anything, make the crown sparkle all the more in its reflection. No, that could not be the cause. I will pause there.